and I don't want to harm you. Yeah, I'm just hoping to charm you.
Live from Studio 1396, Columbus, Ohio, welcome to The Late Lap. Today's guest is someone whose story in motorsports is anything but ordinary. It's a story built on grit, second chances, sharp turns, and straight line speed. From a paper route in Owensboro, Kentucky to victory lane in NASCAR's Cup Series, and later to courtrooms, headlines, and back to the grassroots. Jeremy Mayfield joins us, and he is here tonight. Jeremy, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Very, very well. This is one that I feel like, as we did a little bit of research, you're kind of coming out of your shell and doing some media, but is it fair to say that since about 2010, you've only done maybe a handful of speaking appearances?
Yeah, it's been a while. We've been trying to I guess try all this new stuff, all the podcasts going on, and all this stuff that's happening. And the world's changing every day, and we're getting older and not up to date on what we need to do and how we need to handle all this media stuff. But we're trying hard and just want to get back out there and just race and just be normal again.
That's right. Well, both of our time is valuable, and so is that of the audience. So I'd like to get starting kind of at the grassroots, but also at the beginning. Start back in Owensboro, Kentucky, and what it was like growing up in that place, known for, turning out great racers. I've heard you were on a bike before most kids were even walking. What drew you to speed and wheels?
Man, just ever since I can remember, growing up as a kid, I was always on, bicycles or motorcycles or go-karts or something, just trying to, just love racing. I pretty much loved it from day one and kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do when I grew up and still kind of wanted to, that's what I want to do when I grow up now. But no, it's just been, it's just wild how everything fell in place. I went from, riding motorcycles, mini bikes to racing go-karts. And the next thing you know, I'm racing stock cars. And then all of a sudden you make it to the Cup Series, and which is where every, kid dreams about. It's what I dreamed about. And I wasn't very good at school at all. All I did was draw race cars and think about my race car all the time. So I had to do something, and that's pretty much all I could do.
Well, you weren't just a driver. When you tell somebody's life story in about 30 to 60 minutes, you got to go fast. But you were also a worker. Talk about the early days, early jobs you shaped your racing career outside of the fire suit.
Yeah, well, I really didn't have a lot of jobs. Growing up in Owensboro, it was like I worked at my uncle's body shop a little bit, and helped them. But that's back when I was like 15, 16 years old, something like that. And just kind of really wasn't doing anything. And I left Owensboro when I was like 19 years old, almost 20, and went straight to work for Saddlers and been working, in racing since then. And but yeah, that's pretty much the only job I've ever had is from a body shop to a race shop is pretty much it.
You mentioned the Sadler brothers and kind of that transition there goes to Cale Yarborough. You follow a young man or lady now that's getting into this at a young age, and they have this storied career that may go from go-karting to boats and mountain biking and everything. You had a little bit of ARCA. You ran for the Sadler brothers and Yarborough and Cup. Was there any racing that was notable prior to those stock car national deals?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I raced in around the Owensboro area for 4 or 5 years, something like that. I started off in street stocks and worked my way up to what they call like a sportsman class, and then in the late models. And so with the time I left Owensboro to the time I went to Nashville, I'd already raced a lot. I had a lot of experience behind me, and won several races in around the Kentucky Motor Speedway area. And and then when I went to Saddlers, it was on from then. That's when it really took off. And I said this last night. I did one of these last night, and I was talking about how great the Saddlers were. That they really took me in, and can't thank them enough. I wouldn't have ever made it anything, if it wasn't for them. I started working for them, and then next thing you know, I'm driving for them, and then pretty much running the whole race team for them, and being able to race all that I wanted to race anyway. And then was able to move up to from the local late models in Nashville up to ARCA and then in the Cup Series with them. So, that was pretty cool.
Seems like there was certainly that tier of loyalty that existed there. And so then you get to run for Yarborough. You had that RCA deal, and it
Yep.
seemed like RCA was going to hang on for quite a while. You were in a couple of TV ads, and that's where the
Yeah.
media and the reporters are up your tail. Did you feel at that point you had made it, or was it still the goals of the 500s and the championships? Had you hit a realization quite then?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was pretty cool driving for Kale. I always looked up for Kale, and he's one of my heroes when I used to watch Cup races, and so driving for him was pretty awesome. I learned a lot. Learned about he taught me a lot really. About the racetracks and qualifying and Darlington and just all this little stuff that you need to know that just you put back in your mind and then it starts happening as your career goes. And you don't really realize that it's that important until you start going through the things that he's telling you. And it's just like anything else. When your dad or somebody's telling you you don't need to do this or do that, you don't really, it doesn't mean anything until it really happens. Then you realize, man, that's what they were talking about, and that's what Kel did for me. He was pretty cool. But when I worked in the shop every day. I went there every day to 8 o'clock in the morning, just like one of the guys when I drove for him, and um, pretty much was just one of the team members, and I just happened to be lucky enough to drive it, and so Kel's deal was like. Not a stepping stone, but it was like that. The first back then it used to be you had some, really top notch teams, and you had some intermediate teams, and you had some teams that were kind of right on the edge of not being able to survive because of financial. And we were kind of one of those teams. We were just kind of doing whatever we could do with what we had, and I'd say probably like a million and a half, something like that is what we spent. That was our budget, and back then a $5 million team was a top notch team. So a million and a half didn't go very far, but it went far enough for us to work together and and learned a lot, got a lot of experience, and then was able to move on from there.
So you had some good runs, even a few great ones,
Yeah.
but those early days in the Cup, I wouldn't say were easy, and I think you just explained kind of why. It's nitty gritty. You probably didn't
Yeah.
have any fingernails left by the end of some of those weekends,
Right. Oh yeah.
and
And yeah,
so
it was tough. It was tough back then because you had to qualify. There'd be like, say you go to Richmond or something like that, where there's only 36 spots at that time, and there'd be 50 and 60 cars show up, and you had to make races. Even though we had $1.5 million budget or 2 million or whatever it was, the sponsors were still wanting to not miss races. So you had to perform no matter what at that level, and it was tough. It really was, but there again, back then it was like it was really your goal was to make races, you know what I mean, and then get high enough in the points where you had provisionals to keep going, and that's pretty much what everybody thought about every week, and even some of the top teams, was not going home and be able to be solid enough in the points where they had a provisional if they needed it.
so then you had that alignment with Michael Cranefus, and it turns
Yeah,
into that Penske deal with the 12, the Mobil 1 Ford, which our viewers see on screen.
yeah,
You could argue your greatest moments in the Premier Series were behind the wheel of the 12 or the 19. Getting the wheel to that Mobil 1 Ford had to have been a real highlight.
yeah. That's probably the biggest part of my career was when I went to drive for Michael, and it was Cranifus Haas at the time, and Carl Haas was the other owner. He owned the Indy cars too, and Michael was a super nice guy. I mean, great guy, funny. We had a great time together, and I probably laughed more with them than I had my whole life. We just had a good time all the time, and then Penske bought out Carl Haas, and it became Cranifus or Penske Cranifus, and so then things just took off from there. I was it took us to a whole nother level, and when I went from Kale's to Michael's, and that was like going from like I said, kind of like a low budget team to a high budget team, but yet still wasn't established enough to say that they were an elite team. And then when Penske bought into it, that took us to the level of the top. That's when you've reached the top. And Roger again was a super nice guy, and probably the biggest mistake I made was when in my whole career probably was when Penske and Cranifus were in their little mingle. They were, Roger was buying out Michael and gonna just be Penske racing, and I should have, uh, just been on neutral ground there. But I was, the Cranifus deal was part of my blood. I felt like at the time, we were really
Yeah.
heading in the right direction and doing the right things, and I didn't want to see that go away. And all the guys on the team, we were pretty close, and and I was kind of fighting for what was ours, but not realizing that, Michael's going to be gone when Roger buys him out, and I need to, probably be a better teammate than what I'm being, So that's probably my biggest mistake I made. I should have uh, showed my loyalty to Roger
Yeah.
and them guys and Rusty and all them, and then probably would have been a whole different situation.
Well, in that moment, you're still showing that you're tough and you're aggressive. I think at times it's fair to say that you were tough and aggressive behind the wheel, but you managed to also be pretty clean behind the wheel. How did you manage to have both personalities as a driver with all of the attention the Cup Series drivers get?
Yeah, well, again, back then it wasn't like it is today. Today they're just spinning each other out and wrecking each other
Yeah.
and this, that, and the other. And if you like, I remember I ran probably 3 or 4 cup races, and I remember Bobby Labonte coming to me. He's like, "Man, here's what you gotta do." And I thought, after that conversation with him, I thought, "Man, what's wrong with these guys? I thought we're here to race. And they're telling me that I need to just, don't run hard and this, that, and the other." And I didn't know anything different than that. I thought we would race hard, and you just, every lap run as hard as you can. And what he was getting at was, and it took me a while to figure this out, was you're racing the leader in these cup races. When you're running 500-mile races, you're racing the leader every time, because if you're sitting there running 20th or whatever, and you're racing the guy side by side forever, where your lap times are slowing down, and the leader's coming, and you're going to go a lap down, and then you're going to finish bad and everything else. So, then when the leader doesn't get there, pull over, let him go by, and pull right back in line. You don't lose any time. And so I didn't understand that at first, but that's probably the key moment of one of the things I really had to learn was a 500-mile race. You got to be patient. You got to race people, for the time on the racetrack, not just side by side with each other all day long. And I know that doesn't make sense to a lot of fans right now, but with 10 to go, it's a different story. You race whatever you got to do. But when I figured that out, how to race and run 500-mile races, that helped me a lot, and that made me more of a, I guess you'd say, you know, not yeah, that's just experience. You're gaining experience by that, and you're learning, and it takes a while to get that, but. Um, you still got to be tough. You still got to run every lap hard as you can run. You just don't do nothing stupid, and like I said back then, if you did something stupid and you took out Dale Earnhardt or Darrell Waltrip or one of those guys or Rusty, any of them, you weren't going to be in the sport very long, and I figured that out real quick too, and so that makes you just a better driver, all around cup driver, and you don't see that today very much. You see just everybody's going out running as hard as they can and running over each other, right rear people, and just I don't know, just that wouldn't have went on back then, because Earnhardt, Dale Earnhardt was like our leader of the pack. He's kind of run the show, and if you didn't have his approval and Darrell Walters' approval, back then all the guys that have been there that built the sport to put it what it was today, then you wasn't gonna make it. And I was fortunate enough to be able to learn that pretty quick and not do anything stupid. And I kind of drive that way even today. We're running the races we run.
Yeah.
I watch these guys, they throw the green flag and everybody just takes off and just does all this stuff, and then 20 laps later, you go right by them, drive right by them. And then they wonder why, that we're running good and somebody else may not be running good. But a lot of it's just being disciplined and knowing how to race, pretty much.
You mentioned in that response several times, you mentioned Big E. And of course, that big win in Pocono, you had a little fun in the winner's circle there. But even as much attention as that got, and maybe a little infamy in that era, it wasn't a dirty move. You didn't dump him, you didn't wreck him, you moved him a little, and it was right at the end. So I think
Right.
that's a really good example of what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and well, yeah, that is a good example, because that day there, like if he and I wouldn't, we both come out with 2 tires, and everybody else was on 4, and we're going around the racetrack, and I looked up my mirror and I seen Ricky Rudd and Dale Jarrett were coming. They were right behind us, and so I knew that right then, if I'd have been stupid enough to start racing then, well, here they come, and now we got 4 or 5 cars racing for the win, and so that's when I figured out that you got to think about these things, you got to plan, and whatever happens, happens. You know what I mean? And I wasn't trying to wreck Dale Earnhardt or trying to do anything. We had a little. Uh, I could shift more than everybody else could shift. I shifted twice during the race. A lot of people only shifted once, or upshift and downshift. And I
Yeah.
could do that twice. And so I knew that I had that left over, and I could use that if I needed it through the tunnel turn, because you got your short chute there. But most time, when you don't shift twice, the motor bogs down coming off the tunnel turn. You kind of get this little bogged down feeling, and so I've been riding with Dale, sitting there running right behind him the whole time, and then the last lap I went to the tunnel turn. I hit third gear, which would be 1 to 1, and not took it out of overdrive, and when I done that, it just took off, and I think he pushed a little bit, got a little tight, and I just got a heck of a run. And when I drove up behind him, I thought, because I knew I had a big run on him, I was just going to go up there and just kind of bump him a little bit, and thinking that, well, I'm just going to let him know I was here today, let him know that I could have, done whatever, spun him out or whatever. I wasn't really trying. And then when I got it behind him, I started seeing him get loose before I got there. So I just kind of sit there and waited. And then obviously, you knew what happened after that. And, but yeah, that's one of those deals where if I hadn't got the experience that I had early in my career, I probably would never had that opportunity to win a big race like that against him.
Definitely a big race, and on a 2.5 mile racetrack. Then, Roger was longtime investor and owner in California and Michigan. You got yourself a 2 mile win that same year. And so it seemed like the big tracks might have been your thing. If you fast forward then to the years with Ray, your performance was so strong on the short tracks and a little bit of some change. So driving for Dodge, you did a lot better on the short tracks and some other success. You did get that win as well with Evernham in the 19.
Yeah, we won at Richmond. Got ourselves some points and all that, and that's something I'm proud of too. It was like when I went from Penske to went to Evernham to Dodge, it was I love Dodge, and I loved what they did and how they went about racing, and they put all the resources into it, and we didn't hurt for anything. We had everything you ever wanted, and that was a good time. I had a great time there driving for them and Ray and really the whole team. That was another good situation I was in, and um, it just kind of went away. I'm not sure what all happened there, at the time, but um, I just really appreciate those days. And when you look back on stuff like that and you go, um, I wish I'd have cherished the moments more than I did. What I mean? At the time, you're just so in the grind and in the, race, and then leave on Thursday, and come home Sunday, and you got Monday and Tuesday, and you're right back at it just every single week, and really didn't get a chance to just take a deep breath and realize what all happened. You know what I mean? And it's like even with the Penske deal, all the way through Kales all the way to Ray's deal, man, I was just like head down and not even realizing what the world was all about, and what the opportunity that we had to do what we did. You know what I mean? I mean, I got to do a lot of great things and see a lot of great people and meet a lot of good people.
Yeah.
And never realize how big it was until it's all over. And that's the hard part. But yeah, I can still look back and remember all the memories. I just wish we'd lived the moment a little bit more than what we did.
One of my favorite things that you got to be a part of was the NASCAR 360 show. You and your wife and your guys were regularly getting to be on TV and kind of have a documentary about you made. I'm sure those are pretty good memories. Made a couple of video games and some badass Dodge advertisements as well. A lot of media in that era.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. The 360 deal was awesome. They were with us all the time and met a lot of great people there too. And I thought it was a pretty cool show. Just watching it, I thought it was pretty neat. And I didn't realize how different that my wife and I were to everybody else. I'm sure they all feel the same. You don't really know what everybody else does during the week or how they handle their, business or whatever, or personal stuff. And to see that, it was pretty neat. We're probably more of the laid back type than a lot of them were, but certainly a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And I would say it's fair to say you began elevating yourself as, let's be respectful, maybe not the fan favorite, but a fan favorite. The fans really got to see that side of you in addition to the folks in the industry. Did you feel an influx in the relationship with the fans?
Oh yeah, I definitely did. And, and even today, it's like I met so many people that didn't really know me, knew who I was, or didn't understand the true me, and that's something I look back on too and going, I could have done better in that area too, where, being a little bit more fan friendly and I was always friendly to everybody I met, or did meet, I just a lot of people didn't know a lot about me, you know what I mean, and they still don't, you know, uh, I'm just normal dude from Kentucky, you know, that got a great shot and a great opportunity and was blessed and you know, and just got to live the dream I always wanted to live. And a lot of people never got to see who I truly was. You know, they just seen, you know, the racetrack and probably me being cocky and smart enough on the TV or radio, and that's about it. And not really knowing who I am. You know.
Before moving on to your other opportunities, I don't know that fans know when a driver is telling the truth about the car of choice. But you're saying here 20 years later, you really were a Dodge guy, and that was maybe more special than if you were a Ford guy driving for the Dodge banner?
Oh yeah, it definitely was. You know, I like Ford too when we, you know, with Penske and stuff. But Dodge was just, I don't know, I like their vehicles, I like their cars, and just going from, you know, the way that Ford done everything. You know, the way that, you know, when you go meet the, you know, executives and this, that, and the other, they were totally two totally different ways of doing things, you know. And Dodge was more laid back, you know. The guys had a lot of fun. You know, the president of the company back then, you know, Daryl, and great guy, funny. You know, we had a great time. You know, it's just like they were just more laid back. They were more like the jeans. That wasn't their suit and tie every day. It's just, you know, pretty laid back deal. And then, you know, went over to the SRT part of it where they built the Vipers and all that, and just see how they did all that stuff was pretty neat. You know, it's kind of like its own little off breed deal over here that they do, and it's all about performance, all about racing, and it's just totally different way of doing things. And the cars are great. I love the trucks. I still drive a Dodge truck today, always will, and who knows? It'd be cool one day to get back with them and do something different. You know.
Well, Mr. Kaniskis, I think he may be glad to hear that for sure. He's doing a hell of a job bringing back the different, old school brands. What was your first car?
Man, my first one was about a '78 model Cutlass that was one of those big, pretty good sized Cutlass cars, and it was I'm embarrassed to even say that, but I thought it was going to be a hot rod. You know, it didn't run a lick. You know, it wasn't fast and it's missed and everything else. And I drive that thing to school and had the Cutlass on the windshield and all this stuff. You know, that we made on stickers or whatever, and thought I really had something, but it wasn't much. It wasn't much of anything.
It was pretty cool for a boat, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
So you
Man,
were.
I remember every time I got out of it, I smelled like transmission fluid because it had a transmission leak, and it always smelled like that.
You just smelled sweet, you know.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. That's hard to explain though when you smell like I don't know, like you've been working on cars all the time, which I probably was, but I couldn't go nowhere without having transmission fluid smell to me.
So that was the first car you owned, and entering the 2009 season, you stepped it up to owning one of the coolest cars ever, your own NASCAR Cup Series car. You had an opportunity to run for Gene Haas and a one-off with Ganassi, but you had your eyes set and you started a team. Prior to that, what led to such a major investment? Now every driver wants to own a team. That wasn't as common in that time.
Right back then, it was like at that time, I felt like that. You know, that's when all the stuff I really realized that something was wrong. You know, because I couldn't get a ride, and you know, after the Ray deal, and so I thought, heck, I'll just start my own team. You know, and Tony Furr, and you know, that was right after 2008 though, when the the market fell and all this that and the other. So a lot of people were struggling financially, and we were too. You know, we just decided that, well, if we're going to race, let's just go for it. You know, and we started our own team, and Tony and they put some good group of guys together. You know, those guys that were laid off or came from Bill Davis Racing when he shut down. You know, and so we had a lot of good guys there. You know, and we put it together real quick. And like a couple of weeks before Daytona 500, you know, we're putting it all together, assembling it, and we didn't have all winter. We just had a couple of weeks. So we bought the stuff that we could, you know, the best that we could buy at that point in time,
Sure.
and there was probably a lot of better stuff out there. You know, I'm sure we could have built our own stuff and made it better, but we just kind of bought some cars from Bill and put some motors in it and took off, went racing and made the Daytona 500, and you know, things took off from there. It was pretty cool.
So I want to maybe rapid fire a couple of things from the first half of 2009. Your Toyota, I'm going to suppose that was because they were Bill Davis assets, or was there any kind of manufacturer partnership in that time?
Not really. It was, you know, just because we got in the deal late, you know, whatever. But we were talking to Dodge about we were going to switch to Dodge right after that, and right before I quit, right before we shut down. And we'd already talked to them, and they were going to help us on motors and and all that stuff, which would have been great. And then just to be back with them would have been really cool. Toyota was great; they did a lot of great things. They still are. But there again, I was kind of sensitive to the Dodge deal, and would have been real cool to switch over there.
And then the car number 41, was that an owner's point? What car number was available? Was there any heart in that number or story?
Not really. It was Ganassi. They had given up the 41 because they shut that deal down or whatever. So we just took 41. That was pretty much the coolest looking number at the time. And that's pretty much all it was about. Was just let's just try to pick the best number we can find, and if it looks cool, let's go for it.
If you're a brand new young fan to IndyCar, NASCAR, or drag racing, you might not know what he means by a cool looking number. But there was a real energy for decades behind the personality of those numbers. They were a identity themselves.
Yeah.
So I think I can understand that.
Yeah, and that's what you look at. You look back and watch some of the old races and stuff. You see the 11, it was Darrell Waltrip, and the 88 with Waltrip. And the 3 is Earnhardt, and that's what it was all about. You seen that certain font that they had. If it was cool, it was cool, and people didn't forget that.
That's
if you
right.
see a 3, if you see a 3 on a hat today, an older black hat with 3 on it, you're gonna think of Dale Earnhardt.
That's
and
right.
the 2, Rusty Wallace. And just still today. So
There's definitely some long-term identity, and I actually have become from the business mindset that while we need partners in a different way for race cars, it's nearly impossible for them to buy a whole season now. The business models have changed.
right.
That has stolen the identity from the cars, and I think that's harmful as much as it is helpful to have 15 partners. I believe last on the rapid fire for that 41 car,
Yeah.
I believe you had WWE on the car. Am I remembering that right? If so, what was the story there?
Well, that was on the 36 car with when I was at Bill
That was
Davis. Yeah,
Davis. Okay.
yeah, and everything that whole deal fell through sponsorship wise. We had Kiss on it and WWE and all that stuff, and we had these people come in and they sold the deal to Bill Davis that they were going to sponsor me in the 36 car, and that all these big plans and great things. It all sounded great. And they carried on with some of it, but it wasn't like they were going to have a blimp, just like the Goodyear blimp, and people were going to be down in the stands, and they'd be able to text the blimp, and the blimp, fire back at them, and just all the stuff that's going on today, but even to a higher level than that back then. And but they never, it never came about. They had these, I guess like these hangover pills or something, whatever it was. It was 360 OTC is what they called it, and then. And they started it, and it just fell through. But that's where all that came from, and it would have been a great deal and cool deal if it went through like it's supposed to.
So that season, and I want to approach this next chapter carefully, but fairly. It's a big part of your story, and so I want to go back to what you remember at its earliest, at the infancy of any type of drug testing policy, before any news with your name attached.
Right.
Around when would you say they were testing for racers for any type of illegal substances?
Right. Well, ever since I was in the Cup garage, even as a mechanic, you had to do your physical every year, and then you go and do your drug test or whatever, and that was it. That's pretty much it. And it was the policy was pretty much if somebody thought they you look like you were on drugs or you did something crazy or whatever it was, that they could test you anytime, and that was pretty much it. As far as that goes, and there wasn't really a lot of testing going on. You hear every once in a while, you hear a guy that would fail his drug test or whatever, but it wasn't that big of a deal back then.
And quite a few people have said there was confusion as it developed. There were different doctors overlooking it. The rule books were worded weird.
Yeah.
When the first announcement of a positive test came out with your name attached, do you remember what your first reaction was? Did they tell you? Did they tell somebody with your team and it was relayed? Are you able to walk us through that first day?
Yeah, it was well, like they at the beginning of '09, they had we were in Daytona, and we all got together, all the drivers, and I guess pretty much drivers, the Cup drivers, and a guy named Dr. Black came in and first time I'd heard of Dr. Black or met him or anything, but he'd been there for a long time with NASCAR. And he owned Aegis Labs. So he's the lab owner, and he's doing our NASCAR drug policy program, whatever it was. And so if you fail the test, you got to go through Dr. Black to get back in to NASCAR. And if you tested, you were going to test with Dr. Black through his lab, with that he owned. And so everything was revolved around him, one guy, the whole time. And I thought that was kind of weird to start with, how that would work. And he was with the before NASCAR, he was with also had WWE at the time. And about the time that all this came about with the new drug policy was when Chris Benoit or whatever it was a wrestler that I guess roid
Yeah.
rage or whatever it was, and killed his family and all this stuff, whatever. But Dr. Black had to go in front of Congress because of that, because he's the one that had the WWE's policy, basically. He ran their program just like he did NASCAR's, and they wanted to know why a guy that they look back at his records who tested negative for all these years, whatever, and all of a sudden he went on roid rage and they had all these steroids in the system and they didn't catch it. So right then, I think it got the Dr. Black kind of got the deal where he's like the protects the superstars type deal. I mean, it's obvious when you watch some of the shows back then that those guys were on steroids. I mean, everybody
Sure.
kind of you could look and see. And for him to sit there and have all these negative tests all the time, saying they weren't on steroids. And so that right there kind of was a black flag for me a little bit. And but anyway, he's the one that run the NASCAR's program, whatever. And so when I failed my test, well, they tell me I got to go talk to Dr. Black. And so I'm on the phone calling him and everything. And first of all, I talked to him a week before that, when they tested me at Richmond. We'll back up to that point. I got tested at Richmond, and what they told us at Daytona was if you were taking anything, whether supplements or any kind of medication or whatever, your doctor prescribes or whatever, and
Yeah.
they draw our numbers to be tested because they was going to a random drug test instead of, actually seeing somebody messed up or whatever. So if you got pulled in and got tested, if you were taking something that wasn't on your physical list, then you need to call Dr. Black and tell him what you're taking, and then it'd be up to him to say, okay, you don't need to take that anymore because it's whatever, for whatever reason he didn't feel like you need to take it, whatever, and then you move on. You wouldn't take it anymore, whatever it was. And so when I got tested at Richmond, I called Dr. Black. That's exactly what he told me to do. And I had Claritin D on my physical list forever. The whole time I've been racing it, I
Yep.
always took Claritin D, just a little bit every year, not much. And so that was on my list. And then I started taking Adderall.
Hmm.
Well, at the time I started taking Adderall, I had no idea, none whatsoever, that was a bad deal or it was something that was supposed to give you an advantage or whatever it was. I did it because of my attention span and ADD problems. You know what I mean? Because I've always been that way. I didn't really wasn't very good at school. I think every teacher that would tell you I always was class clown doing something in school. I just couldn't focus and just whatever.
Yeah.
And so I started taking Adderall, got prescribed by my doctor, and so when I called Dr. Black, I couldn't get in touch with him, the whole weekend of Richmond. And he calls me Sunday night and, and says, hey, and I know everybody's heard this before, this whole story, but yeah, I said, hey, I just called to let you know that I started taking Adderall and I got tested through my random test, which is what he told us to do at Richmond. And that was a Thursday and this was Sunday when I talked to him. He said, and didn't even give me a chance. He said, really? He said, what are you doing? What's the person your age doing taking Adderall? Well, I don't know. I mean, that was my answer. I don't know. That's what my doctor put me on. I don't know why. You need to ask her that. And because I didn't have any idea what Adderall did for
Hmm.
anybody. So he goes, well, that's not good. I said, well, if it's not good, that's fine. I'll quit taking it. It's not really doing nothing for me anyway. That's what I told him. Well, he goes, and then I said, well, if that's not good, I'm also taking my Claritin D. I took it, which is on my physical list. He goes, oh, now we got a problem. Really? What's the problem? He said, well, now it looks like you're trying to get stimulated for qualifying. I thought, how did this 3 minute, 4 minute conversation go to Dr. Black and just letting you know what I got prescribed, letting you know what I'm taking. I'm
Yeah.
more than happy not to take it anymore. None of it. How did it go from that to now I'm getting stimulated for qualifying? You know what I mean? And I knew right then, I was like, and he just wouldn't let it go. And I was like, well, dude, look here, I'll do whatever I need to do. I'll quit taking it, whatever you tell me. I'm just telling you, the only reason I called you is because that's what you told me to do in Daytona, you know? And I didn't think it was no big deal. I thought, I'll just quit taking it. It's not a problem. And then the next week came up, never heard anything all week about nothing. He called, he did tell me this. He said, okay, well, we'll see what your results are and we'll go from there. Okay, cool. Never heard nothing the whole week. And Thursday night, I'm on my way to Darlington, and then I get a call from another doctor, this other guy, Dr. Oxman. And he said, Jeremy, you tested positive on your drug test for amphetamines. Okay, I'm sure I did. That's what I told Dr. Black. I called him Sunday. I talked to him, and I'm sure I did. But I'll quit taking it. It's not a problem. He goes, oh, no problem. He goes, he said, did you get a prescription or do you have your history of how long you've been taking it? Sure, I got it all. And it only took it like 2 or 3 months at that time. And so I called my doctor that night. And she sends all this stuff to him, straight
Yeah.
from her to him. And then it's funny because it was at night. It's like now it's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and she's sending all this stuff to him. So next morning I wake up and he calls me back. He says, "Hey man, have you inhaled anything? Have you been inhaling anything?" I said, "Inhaling anything? What do you mean?" "No, I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Well, huh?" And he said on the phone, I guess. I said, "Why? What's the deal? I'm getting ready to go practice. You know, what do you ask me to inhale anything?" So anyway, he goes, "Well, he goes, well, you tested positive when your A sample was. You want us to send your B sample off to another lab to get it tested." And at that time, I'm thinking, okay, if you pee in a cup and they pour one in the A sample and one in the B, it shouldn't be any different. Wouldn't you
Right.
think? Common sense. And I'm like, at that time, I just said, well, I don't, whatever you want to do. I said, but I don't see why, you know, testing my B sample is going to be different than A sample. What are you getting at? Well, we'll just make sure that the lab didn't make a mistake. Okay, whatever you want to do. I said, just like that, whatever you want to do it. But I'm more than happy not to take this stuff anymore. Got off the phone, went and practiced my car, came back, and he had called me like 4 or 5 more times. And so I'm like, calling back. And at the time I was practicing, I thought, why is he talking about inhaling anything? So I remembered in Talladega the week before, I inhaled a bunch of smoke. My car caught on fire. And we had a big wreck, and I bailed out of it. And it's the first time I'd ever felt like I was drowning in smoke.
Hmm.
So I jumped out of my car, and then I remembered that. And I thought, man, maybe that's what he's talking about. You know, so I called him back and said, hey, man, I did inhale something. I forgot. And I forgot the week before that, I was in Talladega, wreck, boom, and inhaled a bunch of smoke. He said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, dude, I don't know what to tell you then. You can test my B sample or whatever you want me to do. I done told you I quit. What more you want from me? You know what I mean? He just kept dragging it out. And I was like, I don't know what else to tell you. Okay.
Yeah.
And we hang the phone up. We missed a race because I missed qualifying, barely made, missed it. And came home, and then Saturday morning I got a call saying I was suspended indefinitely for, failing my drug test. So I asked John Darby, I said, John, man, I sent them everything they wanted. I quit taking. Y'all test me in there every week, every day, whatever you want to do. I'm not going to take Adderall anymore. And John said, well, Jeremy, just get with Dr. Black, and that's the best thing you can do right now is get with him, and he'll determine when you can come back. Okay, cool. So I called Dr. Black and try and get in touch with him, and couldn't get in touch. He wasn't answering, whatever. So he calls me back about 2 or 3 hours later, and this is Saturday, and they're at Darlington. I'm already home, and he says, I said, man, what's going on? I said, I need to. Darby told me to call you and said that I need to get with you about how quick I can come back, and I want to come back. I'll quit taking Adderall, whatever I got to do. No problem. He goes, well, Jeremy said, it's all going to depend on how fast you come back. Will depend on how the press conference goes. It's a press conference. What do you mean press conference? Well, he said they're going to have a press conference in a few minutes. I'm like, about me? He said, yeah, about the drug test. Yeah. I was like, so now I'm thinking, okay, I'm not even there to defend myself. Y'all are getting ready to have a press conference. And I said, well, so what you're saying is how I handle the press conference afterwards, the media, is that's going to determine how quick I can get back in the sport, right? Is that what you're saying? He said, well, unfortunately, yes, that's what I'm saying. I said, oh, so y'all want me to be your little puppet here, and after y'all announce to the world that I failed a drug test, and that's going to ruin everything I got going on, period. You start thinking about that when you think about all the fans that know you, everybody that knows you across the country, they're getting ready to hear this on ESPN and everywhere,
Yep.
So I'm like, this is bullshit, I mean, it really is, and I'm not even there to say anything. So sure enough, they had their press conference, announced everything. Oh, Jeremy Mayfield, this, that, and the other, and it goes out everywhere. Well, now the damage is done. Now, they've done. That's the point right there. The damage has been done to me at that point in time, and I didn't even get a chance. I didn't get a chance to talk to anybody before they done that. About, look, I'll quit taking Adderall. Test me every
Yeah.
single week. Do whatever you want to do. I'm done. And I never even got a chance to say that to anybody. I never got a chance to talk to Mike Helton about it, or Brian France, Jim France, nobody. I was just, now I'm stuck here by myself. Y'all have done announced this deal, and now you want me to come back and act like everything's okay because I want to get back in the sport. I want to keep driving and salvage my career here somehow. And I got to go through Dr. Black. The only guy I can go through is him. You know, and I'm thinking, how's this going to work? I'm not talking to anybody yet, and I got to go back through Dr. Black to get through. And he obviously doesn't like me, or that had it all figured out before I even checked my feet. That Sunday night when I called him. So that's how it all went down, and I got mad. I got pissed off, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm not going down, and I'm not going to sit here and tell the world that I failed a drug test when I take Adderall prescribed by my doctor. One a day is all it took, and they were time released. Not even didn't even I never took two a day, not one time. So I'm sitting there going, I'm not going to take that and go and stand up and tell the world, hey, I did this, that, and the other when I didn't. You know what I mean? And if y'all want to suspend me and you want to keep me out of the sport forever, that's fine. I'm willing to take that chance because I'm going to fight it and do what I can, and hopefully it'll change your policy, and it did. It changed the drug policy. I mean, totally changed it. Dr. Black's not even there, wasn't there right until soon after that. So, if I can do that and help other people, somewhere down the line, that's fine. I'll take the fall. I'm ready, and that's where it all started. I know it's a
And
long drag out deal I just told you, but that's kind of the way it all started right there.
well, I appreciate it. In that time, I am of the opinion that the NASCAR media interpreted you guilty, and the
Oh yeah,
NASCAR fan base interpreted you innocent. Did
right.
you feel the same from the media and the fans at that time?
Oh yeah, I felt well. Here's what you got to understand is that the media is all about. They're not going to say anything against NASCAR. So my whole fight with NASCAR, I didn't have any of the media on my side. They're the normal media for NASCAR. It was always going to be for them, no matter what. They're not going to jump up and say, well, maybe NASCAR was wrong. Maybe Jeremy was right. Maybe, Jeremy's wrong. They're right. Whoever, whatever they want to say, they weren't going to do that, and I wasn't going to get any support because everybody knows, and obviously, and I'm sure everybody watching this knows that if you buck the system any way, shape, or form, you're on your way out. They'll be following me out the door. So nobody's going to say nothing. Everybody was scared. Everybody's just like, don't buck the system. Don't Brian France do this. Brian France do that to you. Brian France do this to you. Well, I'm not afraid of Brian France. I wasn't afraid of Brian France. Still ain't afraid of him. So
Yeah.
that's why I went that route. And I thought the justice system will work, and then they'll see how it all went down and see what happened, and it all work out. Well, that's where the money part comes in. When you got money and you got unlimited budget on going to court and having a lawsuit, I found out real quick you can make a lot of stuff happen.
Yeah.
And I promise you, if I'd had $1 billion like he had, it'd have been a different outcome because I'd played just like he played. They played. And and it would have been way different. I mean, we beat them on all the drug test stuff anyway. The only thing they won the case on was me signing the waiver saying I wouldn't sue NASCAR for any reason, no matter what happened. Now, tell me how fair that is.
Right.
So, it was a bad deal, and it's something that it really has made me. I wish that I felt like I was at the peak of my career. Like I was really starting to get where I wanted to be, and as a driver, and I had a long way to go yet, and just a lot of things were going in the right direction. And that's the hard part when all that goes away. That's when you realize, man, but I wouldn't have changed what I did for nothing. I made that decision to fight it, and I have a lot of people that's asked me over the years, I wish he had just went on to rehab and, and been fine and come back. And I'm like, you know, I'm not going to rehab for what? I mean, what do you go to rehab for? Sit there and go, just because because Dr. Black wants me to go sit there for 30 to 90 days, and it was a point to me. It was like, would it have been easy to go there? Yeah, it'd been an easy way out. But would I be able to hold my head up high and have any kind of, um, morals or anything about me, any kind of damn, you know, I'm not gonna say it on here, but you gotta have some balls somewhere. You know what I mean? And you gotta be stand up and be a man. And I feel like I did that. And I feel like that I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I hadn't stood up for what I believe was right. And anybody that would sit here and let that happen to them and just tuck their tail and go hide underneath the rock and say all the good things about NASCAR that they want to hear, and not do that, I don't want to be around a person like that. And I don't want to be around myself if I was like that. So I just felt like that I did the right thing, and the outcome was not what I wanted by no means. I wanted to, like I said, continue on, and but it happened, and I feel like I'm stronger now than I've ever been, and been through a lot, and feel like that my wife and I are still doing good, doing great, and I'm happily married, and love our dogs and our life, and life goes on, and that's the hard part, but you got to get through it somehow.
We're going to take one very short break and we'll talk about what Jeremy is up to nowadays. You're watching Late Lap.
Hey, I don't mean to alarm you, and I don't want to harm you. Yeah, I'm just hoping to charm you.
Welcome back to Late Lap here on this Wednesday evening. Our guest, former NASCAR driver, and real inspirational story for some, real frustrating for other. I'm telling you, it's controversial just to say hi to you, but you've never done me wrong. I do want to do a couple of shout outs here. Jerry Jordan, NASCAR reporter, saying not all media felt you were guilty. I think that's pretty bold for him to share that in a public setting tonight. We also see that Dujanay Bland, Brian Knuckles, Peyton Lohr, Jeremy Roberts, Taylor Kitchen, quite a few of our routine listeners are tuned in. Jeremy, I appreciate you opening up so much about what really is so notable about your career, but it's not the most important part, and that's that you are a racer. You eventually realized the door was closed, right or wrong, and you rebuilt a lot of your career. You did a little bit of dirt racing, and there's got to be an emotional toll with that exile. When the Cup Garage closed its doors, you end up being behind the wheel. Was dirt your next opportunity wearing a fire suit?
Pretty much, like I always wanted to go dirt racing anyway, and run with the late model guys and this, that, and the other. And I didn't have the money to go and do what the way I really wanted to do it, but I tried and run some, for a buddy of mine down in Georgia, Taylor Griffin, and great friends of ours, Wendell Norton and his wife Pat. They helped me. It kind of come down there and run in the Georgia area, I guess you'd say, and Cherokee and which is South Carolina, but all the tracks around there, Livonia Speedway and all that. So I got to go down and run and have a good time with them and had a blast. Really, it was a lot of fun. It just we just didn't get a chance to do it like we wanted to do it, but it was a lot of fun.
When you're on the Cup Tour, you made it, right? And you're not really able to dabble in these other great events, whether it's a dirt track or a drag race or a supercross. That's your whole world is oval racing.
Yeah.
And maybe it was a silver lining. You had some fun there. What was something fans would be surprised to know about that period of your life? You're kind of moving beyond the court. You're moving beyond NASCAR and the France family. And new life, Jeremy. What is new, and what do fans maybe not know about that period?
Yeah, it was fun. Like we had a great time, racing there, and like I said, running the dirt car. It's just it was still tough getting over. I don't feel like the time I was running the dirt car, I really wasn't over the, I guess you say, the after effects or aftershock of what happened. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That was a tough deal, and so I really wasn't over my NASCAR career yet, and was trying to go dirt racing and trying to act like I was happy with it, and and everything was great, and this, that, and the other. But inside it wasn't, and inside it was like, Sundays I still had to wake up Sunday morning. I'm so used to every Sunday, racing, and I still wake up on Sundays, this day and time, and it just Sundays are bad days for me, just because I was so used to running every Sunday, and so I still struggle there a little bit, but and I wasn't over it yet, and I still feel like there was hope, maybe that I could talk to Brian or Jim or somebody, and we could save all this. You know what I mean? We could, get back together, and I think the fans would have been like that, and I think it would have said a lot about the sport if they would have done that. And anyway, but anyway, that's behind us now. So after that, it was like, I stopped dirt racing for a while, and then Bob Shack uh, gave me a call one day and said, "Hey, you want to come run one of my cars in the races this weekend?" I'm like, "What kind of in this series, whatever?" And I was like, "What kind is it?" He said, "Well, it's a Grand National Super
Yeah.
Series."
Yeah.
And so when I heard about that, I went and ran for Bob, and we won the first time out, won I think Franklin County or somewhere like that, and then I was hooked again. I was like, "Man, this is where I need to be," and because the dirt car, I could run it. I really didn't have a good enough feel or good enough experience, and I kept thinking, here I'm 40 something years old at the time. I was running dirt cars, and how long is it going to take me to get to where I'm good enough, where I feel like I was in the Cup, like in the Cup Series or the Cup cars or asphalt cars, because I know what I need in those cars. I can get it and I can work it on myself and make it happen, but I wasn't that good in the dirt cars where I could do that yet. So I thought it's going to take me 10 years to get just the experience to be able to go run with the big dogs, Davenport and all them guys. And even if I could then, so when I got back in Shaq's car with the asphalt stuff, I just felt like, man, this is now I'm comfortable again, and that's where I wanted to be. And I know when my car's not driving right, I know exactly where to go get it and fix it, and what to do to it, and to be fast. And so I ran with him, the rest of the year. We was only run a couple races, and I talked to him into let me run more than that, because I really wanted to do it. And so he did, and then that's what I've been doing ever since. I ended up,
So
getting my own car and all that stuff, and being able to do that it's been a lot of fun.
the majority of my professional career has been in the NHRA. I do have some dabbling in NASCAR. Tony Stewart now in my world,
Yeah,
and he reminds anyone that wants to talk about drag racing in his heart is what NASCAR used to be. How
right,
would you describe the vibe of the tracks you're racing at now compared to how Cup used to be?
right. Yeah, there's so much, and he's right about that because the drag racing deal is awesome. I mean, I think he's done a great job over there doing what Tony's doing, and that's something we go to, a couple races here, and we got friends, Clay Milliken and Eric Anders, and, there's great friends of ours, and we go see them, and I love it. Every time I go, I want to go drag racing. That's how much I like it. And but yeah, it's more laid back, and you don't have all this. I don't know how to say it, all this. Um, not
Bullshit.
negative. Yeah, not negativity. It's just it just seems like you go in. It's like a TV that you can't get channel on. You know what I mean? Where it's just all this stuff going on all the time. It just you can't see through nothing. You know what I mean? And I don't know, just distracting or something. I don't know what it is, but yeah, like you said, it's probably just bullshit. But you don't have that over there. It seems like everything's cool, laid back, and we don't have it in this series. The Grand National Super Series has been awesome about that. It's not political. It's nothing. You can go get a car, and go race, and any kind of motor you want to put in it, pretty much. And there's a weight rule, or there's not a weight rule, but there's a carburetor rule that goes along with it. It just there's not a lot of rules. There's not a lot of things that you can deal with. I'm sure that's the way drag racing the same way.
Well, the fans sure do seem to love seeing you back behind the wheel. Uh, what has their support meant to you here in this rejuvenated role behind the driver's seat?
Right. I mean, I hear it all the time. I hear a lot, and it makes me feel good that people can see through or has seen through all the stuff that we've gone through, and seen why it happened, this, that, and the other. But the biggest thing is knowing that I'm still racing and I still want to do what I'm doing. I love racing more than anything, and I like winning. I still love to win as much as I ever did. And um, there's times that when I don't win, I kind of still get pissed off about it, and for whatever reason, you always want to run good and be competitive, and I think that goes with anybody that races. You always, um, you don't like when you don't win, obviously, but it's just been good, and to be able to talk to the fans now, I feel like I'm better at that because I take time to. Uh, after the races are over, I'm not running to the airport, running home, just trying to get out of there, Now we take our time. We load the cars up after the end of the night. We're usually the last ones to leave, and I talk to everybody that comes up, and just treat them normal and just like I always have, really. Just able to do it now instead of like I said, being in a rush all the time.
Just a couple of more questions. We want to say thank you for your time. You mentioned your wife so many times this evening, and
Yeah.
I really feel that any man or woman that, and folks watching, it's not my job to make a ruling on Jeremy's career. It's to
Right.
talk to him about his career.
Yeah.
Not many men and women that have experienced what you've had in the last 20 years would have allowed their marriage to survive. What has been so strong and constant for you and Shayna over all of this? It seems
Yeah.
like we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but there doesn't feel to be any blemish.
Right. And I got to say that being in the right marriage, I guess, to the right person means everything. And I know there's a lot of people out there, like I said, that would think that they never would have made it through it, or we wouldn't have made it through it. But she and I are like best friends, and from day one we've been that way. And her family's been nothing but supportive of me. Of everything we've ever had going on or went through. Mine's the same. And we're just great friends, and we love each other. And we knew when we went down that path that we were going down, and she said, and she's never forgot this. She said, I remember the day it happened, right? When Darby called me, she goes, "You are going to fight this, right?" Well, I knew what it meant. She didn't know at the time, but I knew what it meant to fight this. And what that meant was that when you go up against NASCAR for any reason, I'm not just going to be able to go out there and take a little hit and smack them upside the head a little bit and say, "Oh, I'm just joking. I forgot about it. Let me back in." I knew it wasn't going to happen that way. I knew that the day that I got an attorney, that my career was probably going to be over. Unless we won everything. And then if I won everything in sight, I still wasn't going to be. They were going to something's going to come up. I wasn't going to be there. So I knew that, and she didn't really understand at the time. But I said, we're either all in or nothing. And she was with me the whole way. And she said, "Well, I guess we're all in." Because I told her, I said, "Everything we got, you put it in the pile, and we're putting it all on the table." And we did that. And what's crazy about all of it is just by me thinking about it right now, and me and her, she and I have talked about this a lot. Now that we've been through all that, and we've been through everything you go through, pretty much. I mean, hard times. Nothing was easy about none of that. But our relationship, it wasn't hard at all. Like the easiest thing about it was she and I got each other through it. And it's like,
Yeah,
and really, if you look at all the stuff that's happened, like you can sit here now and I can tell you just a few things that went on that you would be like, it blow your mind. And most people can't not only stay married like that because the pressure was on, but wouldn't be able to handle their own self. You know what I mean? So um, we went through all that like nothing. I feel like she and I could do anything. We can go through anything in the world, and we've survived probably the hardest thing anybody could ever go through. And besides, losing each other, obviously to death or something, but we've been through a lot, and it's kind of cool because we're not really shell shocked by it now. We don't really have no um, hard feelings, with anybody. We made it through it, and we're ready to move on. And I'm racing, and we don't have the money like we have by no means, but that's for sure. But money doesn't buy happiness. I can tell you that. I'm the first one to admit that, and it'll help the happiness, but it didn't buy it. And there again, I love her to death, and she hopefully feels the same way about me. And I'll probably go over here in just a second, and when we talk, we'll be laughing about something. We laugh all the time, and always having a good time.
very warm sentiment from Jeremy Mayfield. We texted throughout the week, and I encourage you to have a charity on mind as a thank you for your time. We want to make a donation to some nonprofit or group that you find warm in your heart.
Right. Well, I thought about that, and here's what we are huge animal lovers, and I am. I've always been. We rescue dogs and try everything we can. I mean, if I see a turtle on the road, I'm gonna stop, pick it up, move it over so it doesn't get run over. So anything you can do to help that cause, I would greatly appreciate it. If it's helping the Humane Society or helping a dog get rescued or adopted or whatever you can do, that would be perfect.
That sounds great, and we will do that for you. We have one final question to end the evening. When you look back on your full journey, your your days dreaming, your Cup career, the controversies, the grassroots return. How do you want to be remembered, Jeremy Mayfield?
Well, I'm working on that right now. I'm trying to be remembered as somebody that I think if people know me and get to know me and know that who I really am, that's all I can do. And if I can make somebody else's life easier by telling our story or living our story or whatever we got to do, then that's what I want to be remembered by. It doesn't have nothing to do with winning races or how many trophies they got, how much money I've had, or airplanes we had or anything. That doesn't mean anything to me. And what means something to me is being able to now do what I should have done then, and that's give back to whatever I can, and whichever way I can help somebody, I'd be willing to do that.
Jeremy, I can't thank you enough. We really appreciate you being on this evening.
Yeah, man, thank you, and hopefully we'll be on another time. So let me know.
That sounds great. Jeremy Mayfield on The Late Lap. And as we say at the end of every great show, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, smile, be happy. And until then, take care. And to our friends in the South, sea amable consigo mismo, sea amable con otros, sonría, sea feliz. Hasta entonces, cuídese. Good night, everybody.